Hey guys, before we dive into tonight's little journey into the strange world of the human mind, do me one favor, like the video and subscribe and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? It blows my mind every time to see people tuning in from all corners of the world. Wherever you are, however late it is, get comfortable, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and let's take a quiet walk together into the part of your brain that refuses to shut up when the world goes dark. Because here's the truth most people never hear. Your brain does not care that you have work tomorrow. It cares about survival, and it's very bad at telling ancient threats apart from modern ones. So let's begin. During the day, your mind is an overwhelmed office worker. It's juggling deadlines, messages, responsibilities, and 1,000 tiny tasks you don't even notice. But at night, when the world finally quiets down, your brain switches departments. The logical part goes home. The emotional part clocks in. And suddenly you're lying there in the dark, wide awake, while your brain says, "Hey, do you remember that one embarrassing moment from 2014? Let's relive that in 4K. You're not broken. Your brain is running a different operating system after sunset. It's more sensitive, more alert, and more dramatic than it will ever admit. Why does it do this? Because for 99% of human history, nighttime was dangerous. Not emotionally dangerous, literally dangerous. The dark was where predators hunted, enemies attacked, and small mistakes turned into fatal outcomes. So your brain evolved to stay on guard at night, not fully awake, but never fully asleep either. A survival compromise that's still haunting us thousands of years later. Your bedroom is safe. You know that. You lock your door, close your blinds, climb into your warm bed. But your brain thinks you're lying in a cave with wolves outside. It has no idea what a mattress is. It doesn't know what Wi-Fi is. It doesn't understand that the threat you're thinking about is just an unpaid bill, or a text you haven't answered, or a conversation you're replaying for the 14th time. It just senses unresolved problems and treats them as danger, and danger interrupts sleep. That's why you can be exhausted enough to collapse and still lie awake, because exhaustion only hits the body. Fear, tension, and unresolved thought loops hit the brain, and the brain wins every time. When you fall asleep, your brain shifts from narrative mode to threat detection mode. This is why your thoughts get weirder, less logical, more emotional, more feral. Your night brain is a different creature. It's scanning for danger, listening for sounds, revisiting anything unfinished or unresolved. Evolution didn't give you a calm mode. It gave you a review everything you've ever done wrong and catastrophize. The future mode. Very helpful 20,000 years ago. Very stupid today. That's why your mind spirals at night. It's not random. It's not weakness. It's your brain saying, before I let you fall unconscious for 8 hours, I need to make sure nothing will kill us in the meantime. This is also why worries feel bigger at night. They're the same worries you had at 2 p.m., but now they're filtered through survival instincts and a lack of daylight logic. Everything is heavier in the dark. One of the cruelest tricks the brain plays is this. You need stillness to fall asleep, but stillness itself triggers the alarm system. When you're moving around during the day, your brain is distracted. It doesn't have the bandwidth to go existential. But the moment you lie down, dark room, no noise, no movement, no distractions, your brain sees an opportunity. Perfect. Now that you're powerless to run away, let's talk about every unresolved problem in your life. This is why people feel fine all day and collapse mentally The moment they try to sleep, stillness exposes suppressed thoughts. Stillness gives your subconscious a microphone. Stillness is where the brain checks for danger. And that danger doesn't have to be real. It just has to feel unresolved. A text you avoided, a conversation you regret, a fear about the future, a memory from childhood, a feeling you didn't process. The brain will grab anything because unresolved, dangerous. In the ancient model, it still runs on. Let's talk about self-blame. Because nighttime is when your brain becomes a historian of your failures. It digs up ancient memories like a bored archaeologist who hates you. There's a reason for this too. During the day, emotional memories get suppressed by sensory input. Noise, light, tasks, people, movement. They all drown out the deeper stuff. But at night, your brain files away memories and tries to extract lessons from them to prevent future danger. It thinks, you embarrassed yourself once. Let's relive it so you never do it again. You were hurt by someone. Let's replay it so you'll be prepared next time. You failed before. Let's study that failure from every possible angle. This is why nighttime self-criticism feels endless. It's your brain running survival simulations in the least convenient moment imaginable. At night, your brain's chemistry changes. Cortisol drops, serotonin drops, dopamine drops, executive function goes offline, emotional centers get louder. You're basically left alone with raw emotion and no filters. Your brain becomes a spotlight, shining directly on your fears, with no distractions to soften the glare. That's why things seem hopeless at night. That's why problems feel unsolvable. That's why everything feels heavier. You're not thinking realistically. You're thinking chemically. Nighttime thoughts aren't truth. They're distorted signals from a brain in low-power survival mode. And the moment sun comes up, those signals lose their strength. This alone proves something crucial. Your nighttime anxiety isn't you. It's your brain malfunctioning in predictable ancient ways. Now let's talk about the 3 a.m. spiral. The moment when you wake up from what feels like a perfect sleep, and your brain grabs you by the throat with a single thought. What if everything goes wrong? This is called nocturnal cognition, and it happens because the brain enters a state where minor concerns get magnified and major concerns get theatrical. Why 3 a.m. specifically? Because that's when body temperature is lowest, metabolism is lowest, cognitive control is lowest, emotional reactivity is highest. Your brain is half awake, half dreaming. Logic is asleep, emotion is wide awake, and this produces thoughts that feel more real than truth. You're not fully conscious. You're not fully dreaming. You're trapped in between. That's why 3 a.m. fears feel prophetic. They're not. They're hallucinations wrapped in genuine emotion, and the morning always proves it. But let's go a little deeper into the strange logic your brain follows at night. Because the truth is this. Your brain at 3 a.m. isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to predict it. And it's terrible at predictions. It's like having a weather forecaster in your head who wakes you up at dawn to say, there's a 2% chance of emotional thunderstorms next month. Better panic now. This predictive instinct is baked into the human mind. It didn't evolve for happiness. It evolved for survival. To spot danger before it happens. To assume the worst so you could prepare for it. That's why panic feels so much more convincing in the dark. Your brain thinks it's doing you a favor. If you imagine everything going wrong, maybe you'll be ready, it says. But what it doesn't understand is that imagining disaster doesn't prepare you. It just tortures you. And here's the funny part. During the day, most of these thoughts don't even register. Your brain is busy processing sights, sounds, conversations, movement, sunlight. There's noise, there's distraction, there's reality. But at night, when all that is gone, your brain gets stuck with nothing but its own imagination. And imagination, especially a worried one, is a dangerous tool. People think nighttime anxiety is about problems. It's not. It's about uncertainty. The brain can handle problems. It cannot handle unanswered questions. The brain hates blanks. If it doesn't have an answer, it will invent one. And usually it invents the worst. You're lying in bed, and suddenly you think, what if I lose my job? Not because there's any evidence for that, but because your brain is searching for unresolved issues. It doesn't find any immediate danger, so it starts scanning your future like a paranoid security guard, checking every corner, convinced something must be lurking there. And since darkness amplifies everything, even tiny uncertainties look enormous. This is why your worries feel more realistic at night. Your brain is performing what psychologists call threat simulation. It's rehearsing worst-case scenarios to prevent you from being blindsided. But the problem with rehearsals is that your body doesn't know it's a rehearsal. If you imagine losing your job, your heart rate rises as if it's happening. If you imagine an argument, your body produces the same chemicals as if you're in the middle of one. Your mind practices the fear, and your body pays the price. And this brings us to one of the most important truths about nighttime overthinking. Your brain is not giving you information. It's giving you fears. There's a difference. Information is helpful. Fear is just loud, and nighttime fear is the loudest of all. Because the brain has no competition. Nothing else is happening, so it gets the microphone to itself, and it uses it. Think of your brain like a roommate who ignores you all day, then barges into your room at 3 a.m. like, hey, can we talk about your entire life? And you're like, can this wait until morning? And your brain says, absolutely not. This feels urgent. It always feels urgent at night. Every worry becomes a crisis. Every doubt becomes a prophecy. Every inconvenience becomes a catastrophe. But here's the cruel twist. Your brain is less logical at night, but more confident. It overreacts while being completely sure of itself. It loses all perspective, but speaks with absolute authority. That's why you believe thoughts at 3 a.m. that you would laugh at in daylight. There's something about the combination of silence, darkness, and vulnerability that makes fear sound like truth. And this leads to another psychological trap. At night, your brain assumes the worst because it cannot test the truth. You can't check your email. You can't ask someone for reassurance. You can't get up and solve the problem. So your brain fills the void with imagination. And imagination, especially unsupervised, leans toward a disaster. You might wonder why your thoughts drift to the deepest, darkest things when you can't sleep. Why do people rethink their identity, their purpose, their relationships, their failures? Why does night drag up grief, regret, heartbreak, self-doubt? Because these are the thoughts you suppress during the day. You don't have time to deal with them, so your brain waits. It waits until you're defenseless. It waits until the world is quiet. It waits until you can't run or distract yourself. And then it opens the file cabinet labeled "Stuff We Didn't Finish Processing." It's not doing this to hurt you. It's doing this because it sees unprocessed experiences as a threat. But the timing is terrible. Imagine a fire alarm that only rings when you're asleep. Technically helpful, practically awful. And this is where people start spiraling. A single worry becomes a doorway to 20 more. You go from "I need to sleep" to "what if I never sleep again?" in seconds. The spiral grows, not because the thoughts are true, but because your brain thinks overthinking is a solution. It believes that if it keeps spinning the problem around, eventually it'll find a way out. But overthinking isn't a tool, it's a trap. The more you do it, the deeper it pulls you in. This is why some people get stuck in hours-long loops at night. They feel like they're thinking, but they're not. They're circling, they're replaying, they're ruminating. It feels productive because it feels intense, but it's not productive. It's a cognitive glitch, a survival mechanism firing at the wrong time. And here's something most people don't realize. Your nighttime mind is not capable of solving problems that require logic or planning. That part of your brain is offline. It's literally shut down for the night. So when you're trying to figure out your finances or your future at 2 a.m., you're doing it with the emotional part of your brain, not the rational one. That's like trying to fix a computer using a spoon. You're using the wrong tool for the job. No wonder the results feel terrifying. You know how problems always feel smaller in the morning? That's not magic. That's your prefrontal cortex waking up. That's your emotional brain stepping back. That's your chemistry changing. The problem didn't shrink. Your fear did. And yet people blame themselves. They think, why am I like this? Why am I so anxious? Why can't I control my thoughts? But the truth is brutally simple. Your brain is not designed for peaceful nights. It's designed for survival nights. It's designed for a world where silence meant predators, darkness meant danger, and sleeping deeply meant risking death. You're fighting millions of years of instinct. You're not weak. You're human. But let's talk about the kind of thoughts that keep people awake the most, because they're not random. They follow patterns. Patterns psychologists know well. Some people replay social mistakes. Some fear the future. Some obsess over their health. Some go existential. Some go through their entire romantic history like a detective trying to solve a crime. And some just feel a vague, shapeless dread with no clear cause. Just a heavy weight sitting on the chest, whispering that something is wrong. This dread has a name: nighttime hyperarousal. It's the body staying half alert, half terrified, even when there's nothing to be afraid of. It's the heart beating a little too fast, the breathing getting a little too shallow, the body refusing to drop into deep sleep. People think insomnia is a mental issue. It's not. It's a physiological one. The mind and body both need to feel safe to fall asleep, but the brain can misinterpret anything as danger, even thoughts. And the most dangerous thought of all is, why can't I sleep? Because the moment you start worrying about sleep, you're fully awake again. Worry triggers alertness. Alertness kills sleep. The cycle continues, and the brain panics harder. We're awake. Why are we awake? Something must be wrong. And because it can't find anything wrong, it invents something. It creates fear out of thin air, and suddenly you're lying there, wondering if your whole life is falling apart. But it isn't. Nothing is happening. Nothing changed. You're just caught in a storm, made entirely of thoughts. And here's where the night plays another trick on you. When your brain is tired, it stops being able to filter signal from noise. All thoughts get treated equally. A tiny concern gets the same emotional weight as a real danger. That's why you can lie awake worrying about something as small as sending an awkward text. Your brain can't tell that it's socially harmless. It only sees a threat to acceptance, and acceptance, from an evolutionary standpoint, meant survival. Being socially excluded thousands of years ago wasn't just embarrassing, it was deadly. So your brain treats social fear as physical fear, and at night, those fears get amplified. But let's talk about one of the strangest nighttime phenomena: the sudden, intrusive memory. It hits like a jump scare. You're trying to sleep, and suddenly your brain goes, "Remember that thing you said in 2012? Yeah, let's relive that like it happened 5 seconds ago." Why does this happen? Because your brain is performing emotional housekeeping. It's trying to process anything unresolved, especially anything that made you feel embarrassed, ashamed, rejected, or unsafe. The brain hates loose ends. It wants every emotional thread tied up neatly. And if it finds one that isn't, even if it's a decade old, it drags it into the spotlight. Emotional memories don't age the way factual memories do. They stay raw. They stay sharp. They stay emotionally charged. And at night, when your defenses are down, they come out to play. Nighttime is also when your brain tries to enforce identity. It revisits memories that shaped how you see yourself. Moments where you felt weak, foolish, or exposed. Not because it wants to punish you, but because it wants to prevent you from repeating those experiences. It's a safety mechanism with terrible timing. And this is where people start overanalyzing their personality at night. Who am I? Am I a good person? Did I mess up my life? Why do I always do this? These aren't real questions. They're emotional intrusions. They feel important because they're loaded with fear, but they're not wisdom. They're not insight. They're just anxiety wearing a costume. There's another reason your thoughts get darker at night. You're missing context. Context is what gives life meaning, proportion, and clarity. During the day, you have context everywhere. You see people. You hear sounds. You interact with the reality. Your brain can verify what's true and what's exaggerated. But at night, there's no context. Just darkness, silence, isolation. And without context, your brain fills the void with imagination. And imagination, left unsupervised, drifts toward fear. It always has. Fear kept humans alive. Curiosity got them killed. So the brain evolved a negativity bias. It scans for threats first. It looks for danger before it looks for peace. That's why your nighttime thoughts rarely drift toward happy memories or optimism. They drift toward danger, loss, mistakes, regrets, and what-ifs. What-ifs are the brain's favorite nighttime toy. What if something bad happens? What if you're not good enough? What if the future collapses? What if you're making a huge mistake and don't even realize it? What-ifs don't solve anything. They're not meant to solve anything. They're meant to prepare you emotionally for hypothetical danger. But preparing for something that might never happen only creates stress, and stress keeps you awake. But let's talk about the moment people hate the most. The moment when you glance at the clock and realize how late it is. It's 2:30 or 3:47 or 4:19, and the second you see that number, panic sets in. If I fall asleep right now, I'll get 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours. That countdown is deadly, because the moment you measure your sleep, you lose the ability to fall asleep. Sleep requires surrender. Clock watching is control. The two are incompatible, and your brain knows it. The moment you start calculating how tired you'll be tomorrow, your stress hormones spike, your alertness increases, and sleep becomes impossible. People accidentally turn their beds into battlegrounds, a place associated with frustration, a place associated with failure. The bed becomes a symbol of the struggle. You lie down and your brain goes, "Oh, this place. This is where we panic. This is where we overthink." It becomes conditioned, a mental trigger, and that makes falling asleep even harder. It's a cruel cycle, carved into the mind through habit, fear, and repetition. But let's explore one more thing. why nighttime makes your life feel much worse than it actually is. When you're tired, your emotional tolerance drops. You can't regulate your feelings as well. Small things hurt more. Big things feel impossible. Ordinary stress feels catastrophic. Your brain, deprived of rest, becomes overly sensitive. It interprets ordinary challenges as overwhelming burdens. That's why you can lie in bed thinking your entire life is falling apart, only to wake up and wonder why you were so dramatic. Because night doesn't show you the truth. It shows you your fears, and fears always exaggerate. Another trick the brain pulls at night is replaying conversations, not because it wants to punish you, but because it's trying to decode social danger. Humans are social creatures. Our survival depended on being accepted, trusted, and included. So your brain replays arguments, awkward moments, and misunderstandings at night because it sees them as potential threats to your social standing. It wants to analyze them, dissect them, fix them. But since you can't fix anything at night, the loop never ends. And then there's the future. The brain loves to torture you with the future at night. What if this happens? What if that goes wrong? What if things don't work out? The future is unknown, which means the brain that treats it as dangerous. At nighttime is when danger feels closest, even if nothing is happening, even if everything is fine, even if there's no evidence that anything will go wrong. And yet, your brain fixates on it because fear of the unknown is one of the deepest instincts humans have. It makes your imagination run scenarios that feel real enough to trigger stress. The irony is that worrying about the future at night makes you less capable of handling it during the day. The brain thinks it's preparing you. It's actually training you. But the most important thing to understand is this. Nighttime thoughts are rarely accurate. They're distorted, exaggerated, colored by exhaustion and fear. You are not meant to evaluate your life at 3 a.m. You are not meant to make decisions at 3 a.m. You are not meant to judge yourself at 3 a.m. The brain at that hour is incapable of fairness. There's a reason people describe late night thoughts as monsters in the dark that vanish in daylight, because that's exactly what they are. They're shadows cast on the wall of your mind. They look huge because the room is dark, but let's step even deeper into the machinery of the night mind. Because the truth is this: nighttime isn't just when your brain thinks differently. It's when your brain becomes a historian, a prophet, a critic, a philosopher, and a scared child all at once. It's the hour when every version of you that you've ever been wakes up at the same time and starts talking over each other. And one of the strangest things the brain does at night is replay conversations that never happened. You know exactly what I mean. You're lying there, staring into the dark, and suddenly you're having an imaginary argument with someone. You're defending yourself. You're explaining something. You're preparing a speech you'll never actually give. You're trying to win a conversation that exists only in your mind. Why? Because unresolved social tension is psychological dynamite. The brain can't let it go. Social rejection used to mean death. Being misunderstood used to mean exclusion. And exclusion used to mean starvation, danger, vulnerability. So your mind rehearses social situations obsessively, even when nothing is wrong, just to make sure you're safe tomorrow. Nighttime turns these rehearsals into full dramas. You imagine scenarios. You imagine reactions. You imagine outcomes. Not because any of it is real, but because the brain is trying to protect your social survival, even if it ends up torturing you instead. And then there's the opposite phenomenon. The existential drift. You're trying to sleep and suddenly Your brain decides it's time to contemplate the meaning of life, or death, or the nature of the universe, or whether anything you're doing actually matters. No one knows why the brain loves existential thoughts at night, but one theory is simple. When all external input disappears, your mind begins scanning internally instead. It turns its attention inward, and the deeper it goes, the darker it gets. Combine that with exhaustion and silence, and you get thoughts that feel bottomless. You get the sense that you're falling into your own mind, unable to pull yourself back to the surface. But here's something most people never realize. Your brain can't handle emotional processing and emotional regulation at the same time. During the day, you regulate. You keep yourself moving, distracted, busy, functional. At night, when regulation switches off, processing switches on, and this creates emotional spillover. Your brain starts to process feelings you didn't have the time or space to handle during the day, but it processes them without your conscious guidance. It's like letting a toddler organize your finances. It does its best, but it makes everything worse. And that brings us to one of the cruelest tricks your mind plays: emotional magnification. At night, emotions don't just feel stronger. They feel absolute. If you're lonely, it feels like you'll always be lonely. If you're scared, it feels like the fear will never end. If you're sad, the sadness feels permanent. The brain loses all temporal perspective. It can't imagine tomorrow. It only sees now. That's why nighttime sadness feels deeper than daytime sadness. You can't imagine anything changing. You can't imagine anything improving. You can't imagine morning light. But morning light always comes. The emotional brain can't hold on to perspective in the dark. It thinks the darkness is permanent. Sleep deprivation adds to this. The more tired you are, the more hopeless you feel. Because hopelessness is a neurological state, not a philosophical one. It's just what the brain produces when it doesn't have enough serotonin, enough dopamine, enough regulation, enough safety cues. But the brain doesn't know that. It thinks your sadness has meaning. It thinks your fear is a warning. It mistakes chemical imbalance for truth. And it does all of this while insisting on its own accuracy. This is why people have breakdowns at night. Not because things are worse, but because the brain's ability to fight back is gone. It's unguarded. It's running outdated survival software. And it interprets lack of sleep as lack of safety. But let's talk about one particular fear the brain loves at night. The fear of failure. It hits people harder than anything else. The idea that you might not succeed, that you might not be enough, that you might disappoint yourself or others. This fear crawls out of the shadows at night, more aggressively than any other thought. It whispers that your efforts won't matter, that your potential is wasted, that you're behind, that you're not doing enough. Why does this happen? Because at night, your brain switches from action mode to judgment mode. During the day, you're busy doing things. At night, your brain evaluates how you're doing, and it does so with zero compassion. The brain wasn't built for self-love. It was built for self-preservation, and self-preservation often meant self-criticism, because criticism is supposed to push you towards safety. But in a modern world, criticism doesn't protect you. It paralyzes you. The brain can't tell the difference. And then there's the fear of decisions. People lie awake, terrified of making the wrong choice. They replay, analyze, imagine every outcome. If I choose this path, will I regret it? If I choose the other, will I ruin something? What if everything collapses because of one mistake? And the brain spirals, because it hates uncertainty more than it hates anything else. But here's the thing. Nighttime is the worst possible moment to think about important decisions. Your brain is literally designed to catastrophize them after sunset. It sees danger in every option because its job is to avoid loss, not to pursue growth. That's why decisions always feel overwhelming at night, but manageable in the morning. Morning brings clarity. The logical brain comes online. Emotional distortion fades. Night is distortion. Morning is reality. There's another nighttime trap. The fear of being alone. Not just physically alone, but emotionally alone. The brain, in its nighttime vulnerability, exaggerates any feeling of isolation. It interprets silence as abandonment, darkness as emptiness, lack of stimulation as lack of connection. You're lying in your room, perfectly safe, and your brain acts like you've been left behind by the world. Loneliness isn't an emotion at night. It's a full-body ache. It's an existential pressure. And it's not because you're actually alone. It's because the brain senses disconnection and interprets it as danger. Humans needed groups to survive. Being alone meant death. So the nighttime brain amplifies loneliness until it feels unbearable. But again, it's not truth. It's chemistry. It's instinct. It's old programming reacting to a modern situation. This is why nighttime is when people send messages they regret, when they confess things they shouldn't, when they spiral over relationships, when they obsess over people who aren't in their lives anymore, when they miss people who weren't even good for them. Nighttime makes the brain desperate for safety, and safety often feels like connection, even false connection. And then there's the darkest thought of all, the fear that you are fundamentally flawed, the idea that something is deeply wrong with you, that you're broken in some irreversible way, that other people have something you don't. This thought is a liar, created by a brain running on low emotional resources. Exhaustion distorts self-perception. A tired brain sees flaws where there are none. You see, nighttime strips away your defenses. It exposes insecurities you can manage during the day, and it presents them as truth, because it can't remember what balance feels like. But morning always proves something important. None of those thoughts were accurate. They were symptoms of a brain that needed rest, a brain that felt unsafe, a brain that was trying too hard to protect you. Morning doesn't fix your life. It fixes your perception, and the thing you feared shrinks. But there's another layer to all of this, something most people never realize until it hits them in the middle of the night like a punch to the chest. Your brain doesn't just think differently at night. It remembers differently. It retrieves memories you haven't thought about in years. It drags up moments you thought were resolved, conversations you thought were dead, mistakes you thought were buried under time. Why does the brain do this? Because nighttime is when your emotional memory system goes into cleaning mode. It's trying to sort, process, reorganize. But sometimes, instead of cleaning, it knocks a dusty box off the shelf and spills the contents all over your mental floor. So you're lying there, and suddenly you remember something stupid you said 5 years ago, or a moment you regret, or a person you lost, or a promise you didn't keep, and it hits you with full emotional weight, as if it's happening right now. Night doesn't give you emotional distance. It gives you emotional closeness. Too much of it. The brain has no boundaries at night. Everything becomes immediate. Everything becomes personal. Everything becomes your fault. These memories aren't resurfacing because they matter right now. They resurface because your brain finally has downtime. And downtime is dangerous, because when the mind stops moving forward, it starts digging backward. This is why people sometimes cry before sleeping, not because anything new is wrong, but because something old got reactivated. A scar got touched. A bruise got pressed. The brain does not differentiate between emotional pain and physical pain. To the nervous system, a memory can hurt just as much as a wound. And then there's the other phenomenon. The good memories that hurt. The ones you wish you could go back to. The moments that feel warm but unreachable. The people you miss. The versions of yourself you miss. Nostalgia becomes a kind of slow grief at night, especially when you feel stuck or uncertain about the future. The brain replays better times not to comfort you, but to remind you of what you once had, and what you fear you'll never have again. It's a cruel, unintentional act. Your brain isn't trying to hurt you, it's trying to anchor you, but it doesn't realize that sometimes the anchor drags you deeper instead of keeping you steady. But here's something even stranger. Your brain remembers differently at night because the emotional filter is turned up, while the logical filter is turned off. During the day, logic says, yeah, that was embarrassing, but it's over. At night, emotion says, no, it's happening again. That's the problem. Nighttime is a stage where every past mistake gets reenacted, and you're the only audience member. You relive things you didn't process properly. You confront emotions you postponed, and it doesn't help that your brain assumes patterns. If something hurt once, it predicts it will hurt again. If someone betrayed you once, it predicts everyone will. If you failed before, it predicts you're doomed to repeat it. A tired brain is a pattern-hunting predator. It sees danger in repetition. It sees risk everywhere. It sees future pain in every shadow. And then there's the anticipation of imaginary disasters. The fear of things that haven't happened and may never happen. Nighttime activates the brain's threat simulator. It creates hypothetical scenarios designed to prepare you, protect you, train you, even if the scenarios are ridiculous, extreme, or impossible. You imagine losing everything. You imagine failing publicly. You imagine someone getting hurt. You imagine yourself getting hurt. You imagine worst-case outcomes that have zero basis in reality. At night, probability doesn't matter. Only possibility matters. And possibility feels like certainty. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's overfunctioning. It's trying to keep you alive in a world where danger used to strike in the dark. And because the brain is predicting imaginary threats, it also imagines your reaction to them. You lie there practicing emotional breakdowns for situations that will never happen. You mentally prepare to endure disasters that will never touch you. Your brain thinks planning for imaginary pain will reduce future suffering. But what it really does is create suffering in the present. But as we move deeper into the psychology of the night, we reach another unmistakable pattern. Nighttime creates micro-regrets, tiny, sharp, embarrassing moments that sting more than big regrets. The little things you said, the little things you didn't say, the moments where you felt awkward or out of place. These tiny regrets pile up, one on top of another, until they feel like evidence that something is wrong with you. But they're not evidence. They're just fragments. A scattered mosaic of moments taken out of context. A tired brain sees patterns where there are none. It stitches together unrelated memories and draws conclusions that are not only untrue, but cruel. That's because nighttime invites introspection without direction. You're reflecting, but you're not guiding the reflection. The brain is wandering through your personal history without supervision, picking up whatever it finds and holding it too close to the light. And that's when you get the biggest emotional distortion of all. The belief that your entire life has been a mistake, that everything you've done was the wrong choice, that every path you took was the wrong one. This isn't truth. It's exhaustion. It's cognitive fatigue masquerading as insight. Tired minds don't have perspective. They only have emotion. This is why despair hits hardest at night. This is why hope disappears at night. This is why everything feels definitive at night. Because the brain isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to understand your life with zero resources left. Your emotional engine is empty. Your rational engine is offline. And all that's left is a mind trying to make sense of itself in the dark. But even this isn't the deepest layer. The real core of nighttime psychology is something almost nobody understands. The brain actually becomes more childlike at night. Yes, literally. Neural networks responsible for adult reasoning go quiet, and older, more primitive networks take over. That's why nighttime emotions feel raw. That's why fears feel familiar. That's why you react to things the way you did when you were young. At night, you're not the adult version of yourself. You're a younger version. One who needs protection, comfort, reassurance. You're not weak. You're not dramatic. You're not unstable. You're not broken. You're tired. Your brain is running an outdated operating system, and it's doing its best with what little it has. But there's another truth about the nighttime mind, one that hits especially hard if you've been carrying stress for a long time. Your brain doesn't just think more at night, it feels more. The emotional volume knob gets turned all the way up, and suddenly every tiny feeling becomes a tidal wave. This is because emotional regulation, the system that helps you stay stable, is one of the first things to shut down when you're tired. During the day, you have background dopamine, sunlight, movement, noise, tasks. All of it stabilizes your internal state. But at night, when the world goes quiet, the stabilizers disappear, and your brain, stripped of all the support it had during the day, becomes hypersensitive. That's why a text that would annoy you at 3 p.m. can break your heart at 3 a.m. That's why something small becomes something huge. That's why you overreact, even if you don't act on it. That's why you feel everything too much. Your brain is not broken. It's unprotected. This also explains why people tend to romanticize pain at night. It's not because they want to suffer. It's because the brain blends emotion with memory and creates depth. It turns sadness into poetry. It turns longing into meaning. It turns heartbreak into a story. The night mind is dramatic, sensitive, intense, and it paints everything in deeper colors. But the darker side of this is emotional honesty. Nighttime makes you feel honest. Not accurate, not realistic, but honest. You say things you don't say during the day. You admit feelings you normally ignore. You miss people you normally move on from. You question decisions you were perfectly fine with earlier. And the honesty feels real because it's raw. But raw isn't always true. It's just unfiltered. That's the problem with the nighttime thoughts. They feel like revelations. The mind whispers, "This is how you really feel." And it's convincing because your defenses are down. But nighttime emotions are amplified emotions. They're not lies. They're just exaggerated. They're emotions without the balance of perspective. And then comes the physical side. Notice how your chest gets tight at night, how your breathing isn't smooth, how your heartbeat feels too noticeable. That's your nervous system misinterpreting stillness as vulnerability. During the day, your brain has constant sensory input, background noise, visual signals, movement, conversation. It uses all this data to confirm safety. But at night, with no external signals, the brain defaults to caution. It increases bodily awareness. It heightens vigilance. Your heartbeat becomes too loud. Your breaths become too deliberate. Your body acts like something might go wrong, even when nothing is happening. This hyper-awareness is the fertile soil where anxiety grows roots. Your brain notices sensations it normally ignores. A twitch becomes a threat. A tightness becomes danger. A thought becomes a prophecy. And suddenly you're spiraling over your own heartbeat in a room where nothing is wrong. This is why people mistake nighttime anxiety for intuition. They think this fear must mean something. This worry must be a warning. But it's not intuition. It's biology. It's primitive survival code firing in the wrong era. If anything, nighttime fear is the least reliable form of intuition. It comes from exhaustion, not insight. From vigilance, not wisdom. And then, there's the strangest twist. The nighttime mind becomes more creative. Yes, anxiety and creativity use similar neural pathways. When your brain imagines threats, it uses the same imagination that could write a story, solve a problem, or invent something new. Creativity doesn't rest at night. It transforms from inspiration into fear. You're not overthinking. You're creatively predicting disaster. That's why some of your worst fears sound like stories. Elaborate, detailed, vivid. The brain is telling a narrative. And because stories feel real, the fear feels real. But let's move into one of the riskiest parts of night. Psychology. The sudden desire for escape. Not in a dark, harmful sense, but in the I should quit everything and disappear sense. The urge to run away, to start fresh, to abandon your responsibilities, to make drastic life changes. Nighttime makes the world feel too small, your problems too big, and your options too limited. So the brain imagines escape, new places, new jobs, new identities. It imagines freedom. The problem, these thoughts are almost never based on actual desire. They're based on overwhelm. A tired brain doesn't want change. It wants relief. It wants pressure to stop. And the fastest path to relief is imagining a new life. This is why people fantasize about leaving everything behind at 2 a.m., but feel fine the next day. The nighttime mind doesn't want a new life. It wants a break from the current one. Another nighttime trap is self-doubt. Not regular self-doubt, catastrophic self-doubt. The kind where you question whether you're capable of anything at all. You question your intelligence, your worth, your abilities. You question your purpose. You question your future. You question your entire identity. This is because the tired brain can't differentiate between temporary difficulty and permanent inability. The brain feels weak and assumes you are weak. It feels tired and assumes you are failing. It feels foggy and assumes you are stupid. It projects its temporary dysfunction onto your entire character. Nighttime self-doubt is inaccurate self-doubt. Powerful, yes, but deeply inaccurate. This question breaks people, not because the answer is bad, but because the brain is too tired to see the answer clearly. You start doubting your relationships. You start doubting your place in the world. You start doubting whether you matter to anyone at all. You start doubting if you're living the life you're supposed to live. This doubt isn't real. It's deprivation, a lack of emotional data, a lack of social cues, a lack of context. Nighttime deprives the brain of the signals it needs to feel connected, so it fills the void with fear. That fear becomes the illusion of loneliness, an illusion so convincing that it doesn't feel like a thought. It feels like a truth. And the problem is, nighttime amplifies silence. Silence becomes evidence. Evidence becomes belief. Belief becomes fear. And fear becomes a story. A story that says, maybe you're not enough. Maybe no one cares as much as you think. Maybe you're replaceable. Maybe you're alone. These stories have nothing to do with reality. They're generated by a brain searching for connection in a moment when connection isn't available. The brain mistakes absence of proof for proof of absence. And then there's the emotional paradox. Nighttime is when people feel most alone. And yet, it's also when people crave vulnerability the most. You want someone to talk to. You want someone to listen. You want someone to understand. You want a presence in the dark. Not to solve anything. Just to exist with you. But nighttime vulnerability comes with a cost. It lowers your standards. It makes you miss people who weren't good for you. It makes you reach out to people you've outgrown. It makes you consider reconnecting with someone who once hurt you. Not because you want them, but because your brain wants comfort. That's the danger of nighttime emotion. It confuses comfort with compatibility. It confuses familiarity with value. It confuses loneliness with longing. Half the people you think you miss at 2 a.m. are people your daytime mind is already healed from. Nighttime resurrects ghosts. Not because they matter, but because you're tired. Your brain is searching for a soothing pattern. And the easiest soothing pattern is someone you once cared about. Someone who once made you feel safe, even if the relationship was toxic. This is why people relapse into old relationships at night. This is why people send messages they regret. This is why people reopen doors they fought hard to close. Not out of love, out of exhaustion. But nighttime longing isn't limited to people. It extends to every part of your life. You long for a future you haven't reached. You long for a past you can't return to. You long for a version of yourself you barely remember. You long for a life that feels easier. Nighttime is longing in its purest form. Not because your life is wrong, but because nighttime strips away your distractions and reveals your unmet needs. But the mind doesn't know how to differentiate between need and failure. So it interprets unmet needs as proof that you're behind, that you're failing, that you're not enough, that everyone else is further along than you. Comparison thrives at night. You start measuring your life against imaginary standards. You start believing everyone else is happier, more successful, more stable. You start convincing yourself you're the exception, the one who can't get it right. But there's something deeply important here. Comparison only happens when identity feels weak. And identity feels weakest when you're tired. The nighttime mind doesn't just struggle with emotions. It struggles with self-definition. Your sense of identity becomes blurry. You lose grip on who you are, what you want, what you're capable of. The mind becomes a foggy mirror. And whatever reflection you see, you assume it's accurate. It isn't. It's distorted. It's blurred by exhaustion, fear, and silence. But there's another reason the nighttime mind spirals. Because darkness removes distractions, but it also removes escapes. During the day, if you feel stressed, you can move, talk, work, eat, scroll, distract, avoid. But at night, there is nowhere to go. You're trapped with yourself, and for many people that's the scariest place to be. Nighttime forces you into internal confrontation. You meet the parts of yourself you avoid, the fears you suppress, the insecurities you hide, the wounds you never treated, the dreams you abandoned, the truths you're not ready to admit, not because you're weak, but because the silence lets the echoes surface. The nighttime mind exposes your rawest version, not the curated one, not the functional one, the real one, the one that's tired, the one that's hurting, the one that wants more, the one that's afraid, the one that's trying. And that's why nighttime can feel like falling apart, because the version of you that emerges at night is the version you've been carrying all along, a version that needs attention, a version that needs soothing, a version that needs love, not from others, from you. But to really understand why the nighttime mind feels so overwhelming, we need to talk about something most people never realize. Your brain is actually running two different versions of you. There's the daytime self, the one who functions, performs, manages, thinks, survives. And then there's the nighttime self, the one who feels, remembers, aches, questions, and breaks. They share the same body, but they are not the same consciousness. During the day, your brain is in performance mode. You operate with structure, purpose, tasks, roles, responsibilities. You have to show up. You have to answer messages. You have to be productive. You have to function. This mode suppresses emotions to keep you moving. But at night, performance mode shuts down, and the emotional backlog comes flooding in. This isn't a flaw. It's biology. The brain can't process deep emotion while you're busy living. It does it when everything stops. But here's the twist. Your nighttime self isn't wiser, even though it feels like it is. It's just unfiltered. It thinks it's revealing truth, but it's revealing wounds. It thinks it's showing insight, but it's showing fatigue. It thinks it's giving warnings, but it's giving fear. A tired brain makes everything feel final. A tired brain makes everything feel personal. A tired brain makes everything feel urgent, but none of it is. This is where people get trapped. In the illusion of urgency. The illusion that thoughts must be acted on. That emotions must be believed. That conclusions must be trusted. But nighttime emotions are temporary. Nighttime thoughts are temporary. Nighttime identity is temporary. You are not yourself at 2 a.m. You are your nervous system in crisis. You are your memory circuits firing without supervision. You are your fears wearing the mask of truth. But there's another layer. Something deeper. Something more ancient. Your brain interprets darkness as vulnerability. For millions of years, humans slept in places where danger lurked. Outside, predators, enemies, storms. The dark was not safe. So the brain evolved to remain partially alert at night. Even today in modern bedrooms, with locked doors and electric lights, part of your brain behaves as if danger might still exist. That's why you jolt awake with a sense of dread. That's why a small sound feels enormous. That's why your heartbeat seems too loud. That's why the dark feels heavier than it should. Your brain is not reacting to your room. It's reacting to your ancestry. And then there's the hypervigilance. Not full panic, just heightened awareness. This awareness makes you overthink everything. Sensations, emotions, memories, fears. It puts you on a quiet mental high alert. You're not panicking, but you're not calm either. You're suspended between the two. Restless, uneasy, and deeply introspective. This state can make you feel like you're unraveling. But what's really happening is simpler. Your brain is scanning for threats in a world where none exist. It's doing a job that stopped being necessary centuries ago. But the brain hasn't updated the software. And this outdated software also fuels another nighttime phenomenon. Self-blame. When the brain can't find an external threat, it turns inward. It assumes the threat is you, your decisions, your flaws, your failures, your past. It attacks the self because it doesn't know where else to aim. So the nighttime mind becomes a critic. It becomes a prosecutor. It becomes a judge.
Why did you say that?
Why are you like this? Why can't you do better? What's wrong with you? Why can't you just get your life together? These questions are not genuine. They're defensive. They're attempts to make sense of fear by giving it a source. The brain would rather blame you than admit it doesn't know why it feels unsafe. And then there's the emotional stacking. When one fear triggers another, and then another, until a small worry becomes an avalanche. You start with a simple thought like, I'm tired. Then it becomes, I'm tired because I'm stressed. I'm stressed because my life is unstable. My life is unstable because I'm failing. I'm failing because I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough because something is wrong with me. All from one seed, all from one exhausted mind, all from a moment of silence. And maybe the most painful part, nighttime strips away your emotional armor. During the day, you can pretend, you can act strong, you can push through. But at night, there's no performance. There's just you, the real you, the hurting you, the confused you, the hopeful you, the human you. And this vulnerability can feel like weakness, but it isn't. It's the truth beneath the noise. It's the part of you that doesn't get attention. It's the part of you that carries everything quietly. The nighttime mind isn't your enemy. It's your internal truth trying to surface, but doing so clumsily, painfully, and at the wrong hour. You're not falling apart. You're finally hearing yourself. But nighttime exaggerates every whisper into a scream, every ache into a crisis, every memory into a prophecy. It turns healing into hurting simply because the brain doesn't know how to process gently when it's tired. And this leads to one final layer of the nighttime mind. The fear of the future, not the real future, the imagined one. You imagine worst-case scenarios because the brain is trying to prepare for every possible outcome. It thinks that worrying now will reduce pain later. It thinks that predicting disaster will protect you, but all it really does is drain you. At night, the future feels heavy. It feels uncertain. It feels threatening, not because it is, but because nighttime strips away your resilience. You're not scared of the future. You're scared of handling it alone. You're scared of not being ready. You're scared of being too tired, too flawed, too overwhelmed. You're not scared of tomorrow. You're scared in the dark, and darkness distorts everything. But there's something else the nighttime mind does. Something subtle, something you might not even notice unless you're paying attention. It disconnects you from reality, just enough that everything starts to feel slightly unreal. Not in a dramatic, dissociative way, just in a soft, unsettling way. Like you're watching your own life from a distance. Like your memories don't feel like yours. Like the world is wrapped in a thin layer of fog. This isn't madness. It's sensory deprivation. When you lie in bed at night, your brain receives almost no external input. No light shifts, no sounds, no movement, no conversation, no sensory anchors. And when the brain has nothing to hold on to, it pulls away from the present moment. That subtle drifting feeling is your mind floating without reference points. This drifting can make your problems feel larger. You're not grounded. You're not oriented. You're not anchored. And when you're unanchored, emotions swell to fill the space. This is also why nighttime thoughts feel philosophical. When sensory input decreases, abstract thinking increases. Your brain leaves the physical world and enters the conceptual one. It starts analyzing things you'd never think about during the day. The passage of time, the direction of your life, the meaning of your choices, the fragility of everything. These thoughts can feel profound, but they're usually just exhaustion wearing a poetic mask. And then there's the repetition, the looping thoughts. You think the same sentence over and over. You replay the same worry. You rehearse the same fear. This looping is your brain attempting to solve an emotional problem with logic. But emotions don't respond to logic, and logic doesn't respond to fatigue. So your brain keeps cycling, stuck between two systems that can't communicate. This loop feels torturous because it's unsolvable at night. A tired brain cannot reach productive insight. It just chews on the same thought until morning. And then there's the feeling that you should be doing something about your life right now. The pressure to change, the pressure to decide, the pressure to take control. People suddenly feel like they need a plan, like they need an answer, like they need to fix everything immediately. But this urgency is fake. It's a byproduct of mental exhaustion. You're not actually behind. You just feel behind because the nighttime mind magnifies everything. And then we hit one of the most painful nighttime illusions, the belief that you're failing compared to others, that you're the only one struggling, that everyone else has their life together, that everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck. This belief is not rooted in reality. It's rooted in isolation. At night, you don't see other people's problems. You don't see their mistakes. You don't see their anxiety. You don't see their doubts. You don't see their chaos. You only see your own. When the world is quiet, your struggle becomes the only struggle you're aware of. So your brain assumes you're the exception, the one who can't figure life out. But you're not the exception. You're just awake when others are asleep. And then there's the guilt, the nighttime guilt, the guilt about things you didn't do, the guilt about things you did, the guilt about being behind, the guilt about resting, the guilt about not being perfect. Nighttime turns guilt into gravity. Every small mistake feels like a moral failure. Every tiny flaw feels like evidence. Every imperfection feels like punishment. You believe you should have been better. You believe you should have tried harder. You believe you should have known more. You believe you should have predicted the outcome. But the brain at night doesn't want forgiveness. It wants control, and guilt feels like control. It gives you an illusion of agency over things that were never your responsibility in the first place. But the darkest emotional illusion at night is the fear that you don't deserve happiness, that you don't deserve love, that you don't deserve success, that something about you is inherently disqualifying. This belief is born from exhaustion and emotional depletion. When the brain is tired, self-worth collapses first. Confidence requires energy. Self-esteem requires stability. Hope requires clarity. A tired mind can't access any of those, so it interprets the absence as deficiency. You're not unworthy. You're drained. But nighttime doesn't distinguish between the two. It whispers the cruelest things because it has no strength left for compassion. And then there's the strange sensation that your life is slipping away faster at night. You feel the weight of time. You feel the pressure of aging. You feel the urgency of moving forward. You feel the loss of wasted days. You feel the fear of wasting the future. This is because nighttime activates temporal awareness. Your brain starts measuring your life, not in years and regrets, not in goals and fears, not in progress and pressure. But morning always reveals the truth. You're not running out of time. You're running out of energy. The nighttime mind creates a false countdown, a fake urgency, a pressure that dissolves with the sun. The morning brain understands something the nighttime brain cannot. Life is long, and change takes time. You're not behind. You're just tired. You're not lost. You're just overwhelmed. You're not failing. You're just human. And nighttime is the magnifying glass that makes every crack look like a fracture. But there's still one more layer to the nighttime mind that people almost never talk about. The way the brain begins to question your entire direction in life when you're at your lowest energy. Not because something is wrong with your path, but because your brain cannot separate fatigue from meaning. When you're tired, everything feels pointless. And when everything feels pointless, the brain starts searching for reasons. This is why people feel lost at 2 a.m. Not because they are lost, but because exhaustion mimics emptiness. A tired mind asks impossible questions. What am I doing with my life? Is this really where I want to be? Why am I not further along? What if I made all the wrong choices? What if I'm wasting my potential? These questions don't come from clarity. They come from depletion, and nighttime depletion is brutal. The brain's ability to create meaning depends on neurotransmitters, on dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. And at night, especially when you're exhausted, these chemicals drop to low levels, so your brain loses the ability to feel motivated, hopeful, or confident. You're not actually facing an existential crisis. You're facing a chemical drought, but the mind interprets the drought as failure, as hopelessness, as directionlessness, as proof that something is deeply wrong with your life. And then, the brain makes the mistake of believing its own exhaustion. It tells you, this is the truth. This is how things really are. But that's a lie born from imbalance. Nighttime existential dread feels real because it carries emotion. But emotion is not evidence. Another nighttime trap is self-comparison. During the day, you see people living their own lives. You see flaws, frustrations, imperfections. You interact with human beings who are just as confused and tired as you are. But at night, you only see your imagination of their lives, and your imagination only shows the best parts. You compare your whole existence to someone else's highlight reel, not the real version, the imagined version, and no one wins in that comparison. This is why nighttime convinces you you're behind, even when you're not. It convinces you that everyone else has it figured out, even when they're hiding their own fears. It convinces you that you're failing, because it can't see anyone else struggling in the dark. You're comparing your 2 a.m. panic to their daytime composure, a comparison that was never fair. But then comes one of the most powerful nighttime illusions, the belief that you've ruined your life. The brain loves to exaggerate mistakes at night. It takes one wrong choice and expands it into a catastrophic narrative. You didn't just make a mistake. You ruined everything. You didn't just fail. You doomed yourself. You didn't just choose wrong. You permanently derailed your future. None of this is true, but nighttime doesn't do nuance. It does absolutes. And when the mind is running low on resources, absolutes feel easier to believe than possibilities. It's easier to say everything is ruined than to say I'm tired and overwhelmed. Another part of the nighttime mind is fear of vulnerability. When everything gets quiet, your brain becomes aware of emotional wounds you've ignored, and it interprets them as fresh damage. Old fears feel new. Old pains feel recent. Old insecurities feel immediate. Nighttime makes you feel fragile because the protective layer of daytime coping is gone. You're not actually more broken at night. You're just less defended. This fragility makes you overinterpret everything. A small silence becomes rejection. A missed message becomes abandonment. A neutral interaction becomes proof that someone is disappointed in you. And the worst part is, the brain believes its own conclusions. Exhaustion removes skepticism. Everything feels true, because nothing is filtered. This is why people spiral into relationship anxiety at night. Not because the relationship is wrong, but because their emotional regulation is offline. The tired brain cannot separate emotion from fact. It cannot separate fear from intuition. It cannot separate insecurity from reality. So, it blends them together into a story that feels real and terrifying. But one of the deepest nighttime illusions is the belief that you're a burden. This belief hits hard, and it feels convincing because it comes from vulnerability. When you're tired, your brain misreads your own need for support. as proof that you're too much, too needy, too weak. You're not a burden. You're just human. But nighttime cannot see the difference. And emotional hunger becomes emotional shame. You want comfort, but you feel wrong for wanting it. You want closeness, but you feel undeserving of it. You want reassurance, but you believe needing reassurance is failure. Nighttime is when the brain punishes you for being human. But maybe the darkest part is the fear of stagnation, the fear that you're stuck, the fear that you're not growing, the fear that life is passing you by, the fear that you'll wake up one day and regret everything. This fear is not a sign that you're stuck. It's a sign that you're ready for change. The nighttime mind doesn't just expose wounds. It exposes longing. The longing for direction. The longing for purpose. The longing for clarity. The longing for a life that feels like yours. This longing hurts because it's real. But nighttime magnifies it into urgency, panic, despair. It makes you feel like you must fix your entire life right now, in the middle of the night, with no energy, no clarity, no support, and no sunlight. You're not actually in crisis. You're just trying to solve your life while half your brain is asleep. Nighttime is the worst moment to evaluate your future. Yet it's the moment your brain insists on doing it. And then there's the fatigue, the deep, bone-level tiredness, the kind that makes you feel like you're carrying the entire weight of your existence. This tiredness isn't physical, it's emotional. It's the exhaustion of holding yourself together all day. It's the exhaustion of being strong for too long. It's the exhaustion of not having space to collapse until the world goes quiet. That collapse, the emotional collapse, only shows up at night because that's the only time your brain believes it's safe to fall apart. You're not falling apart because you're weak. You're falling apart because you held yourself together all day. But even after everything we've covered, the fear, the looping thoughts, the loneliness, the regrets, the illusions, there's still one last piece of the nighttime mind that people rarely understand. Nighttime doesn't just reveal your pain, it reveals your unmet needs. This is the part most people miss. They think the nighttime mind is attacking them, but really it's pointing at the parts of you that haven't been heard, pointing at the parts of you that haven't been healed, pointing at the parts of you that need attention, honesty, space, and care. The mind doesn't scream at night because you're broken. It screams because something inside you has been ignored for too long. The overthinking, the fear, the spirals, they're signals, not threats. Signals that something needs to change. Something needs to be seen. Something needs to be cared for. And this is why the nighttime mind feels so intense. You finally have no distractions. You finally have no noise. You finally have no external obligations pulling you away from yourself. It's just you and everything you've pushed aside. The silence is not the enemy. The silence is the mirror. And most people are terrified of what the mirror shows. Not because it's ugly, but because it's honest. Nighttime honesty can feel brutal, because daytime honesty is filtered. You only face what you have energy to face. But at night, there is no filter, no schedule, no performance. What you feel is what's actually there, beneath all the coping mechanisms. But the important thing is this. Nighttime honesty is not balanced honesty. It shows you what hurts, but not what's strong. It shows you what's missing, but not what's present. It shows you what still needs work, but not how far you've come. And because the brain is tired, it amplifies the negative and forgets the positive. Not because your life is bad, but because your brain is depleted. This is why people think they understand themselves better at night, but they actually understand themselves less. They think the nighttime mind is insightful, but it's actually panicked. They think the nighttime mind is revealing truth, but it's revealing tension. You are not discovering your deepest self at 2 a.m. You're discovering your most overwhelmed self, and that version of you deserves compassion, not analysis. But the mind doesn't seek compassion at night. It seeks control. It wants answers. It wants certainty. It wants relief. And when relief doesn't come, it spirals. And that spiral makes you think you're broken. It makes you think you're failing. It makes you think you can't handle life. But none of that is true. The truth is simpler. Your brain is tired. And tired brains don't know how to soothe themselves. Tired brains panic. Tired brains doubt. Tired brains fear. Tired brains exaggerate. Tired brains protect. Tired brains predict disaster, because predicting disaster used to save lives. But nighttime panic is not a sign of danger. It's a sign of overload. It's your brain begging you to slow down, begging you to breathe, begging you to rest, begging you to stop carrying everything alone. And now, we arrive at the most human part of the nighttime mind, the desire for closeness, the desire for connection, the desire for someone to say, "It's okay, I'm here, you're safe." This desire is primal. It lives in all of us, and it emerges when the world is dark and quiet, because that's when humans used to need each other most. You're not weak for wanting closeness at night. You're human. Your brain is wired for warmth, presence, reassurance. And when those things aren't available, your brain panics, not because you're in danger, but because you evolved to face the dark with others, not alone. The nighttime mind isn't screaming for answers. It's screaming for comfort. It doesn't want solutions. It wants safety. It wants to feel held. It wants to feel understood. The tragedy is that most people respond to this need with self-criticism instead of self-comfort. They beat themselves up for feeling fragile. They punish themselves for feeling emotional. They shame themselves for needing reassurance. But fragility is not failure. Fragility is a signal. It says, "You've carried too much today." It says, "This weight is heavy." It says, "You're not meant to do this alone." Every nighttime thought, every spiral, every fear, it's all the same message spoken in different languages. I am tired. I am overwhelmed. I need support. And the cruel part is, instead of giving yourself support, you give yourself fear. But maybe the most important truth of all is this: the version of you that exists at night is not a weaker version. It's the honest version. The version without distraction. The version without armor. The version without performance. It's the version of you that feels. The version of you that remembers. The version of you that aches. The version of you that hopes. And yes, the version of you that hurts. But hurting doesn't make it wrong. Hurting makes it real. Hurting makes it human. And the feelings that rise at night are not meant to destroy you. They're meant to guide you, to show you where the wounds still live, to show you where the healing needs to begin, not through fear, not through punishment, but through attention, because the nighttime mind isn't asking for solutions, it's asking for care. And now we arrive at something deeper, something people rarely confront, even in the quiet of the night. The nighttime mind isn't only reliving the past or imagining the worst. It's searching for meaning, direction, purpose, identity. Because when everything around you goes silent, the one question that rises louder than anything else is, what am I doing with my life? Not in a poetic, inspirational way, in a raw, uncomfortable, unfiltered way. The kind of question that hits you in the chest at 3:17 a.m. when the ceiling looks like infinity and your heart won't slow down. The kind of question you usually avoid when the sun is up and your schedule keeps you distracted. But at night, there is no schedule. At night, there is no noise to drown it out. And so the questions come, not because you're lost, but because you're finally quiet enough to feel the parts of yourself you've ignored. People think they're overthinking because they're weak, but the truth is they're overthinking because they're underfeeling. Emotions that don't get processed become thoughts. Thoughts that don't get resolved become loops. Loops that don't get interrupted become panic. Your mind is not malfunctioning at night. It's overflowing. Overflowing with everything you didn't allow yourself to feel at 2 p.m. Overflowing with everything you numbed, postponed, dismissed, or swallowed whole. Overflowing with unspoken fears. Overflowing with unmade decisions. Overflowing with unmet needs. We live in a world where people handle stress by outrunning it. Then they wonder why it catches up the moment they stop moving. Night is the only time your brain isn't running from anything, so everything catches up at once. This is why emotional clarity at night feels sharper, not because your mind is wise at 3 a.m., but because it's unarmored. The daytime mind protects you. The nighttime mind exposes you. But exposure isn't danger. Exposure is truth. And here's the thing people never tell you. Most of the pain you feel at night isn't coming from your present. It's coming from your past. Old memories disguised as new fears. Old wounds disguised as new anxieties. Old patterns disguised as new problems. Your brain replays the past because it still believes something unfinished lives there. Something unspoken. Something unhealed. Something unresolved. When the brain doesn't know how to close a chapter, it keeps rereading it. And the worst part, it keeps looking for the mistake. The moment everything should have gone differently. The moment you should have known better. The moment you failed, even if you didn't fail at all. Nighttime regret is rarely about what happened. It's usually about what you think you should have done. But regret is not honesty. Regret is imagination weaponized. It's the mind trying to rewrite the past to relieve a wound it never got to process. And once you understand that, something shifts. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop judging yourself. You stop fighting your own brain. You realize the mind is not attacking you. It's grieving something. A loss, a disappointment, a version of you that never got to exist. A moment that still hurts when you touch it. A hope that died quietly without closure. Grief doesn't only come when someone dies. It comes when dreams die, when relationships die, when versions of you die. And nighttime is when all the funerals you never attended come knocking. The truth is, most people aren't lying awake because they're anxious. They're lying awake because they're grieving things no one ever taught them to mourn. The opportunities they missed, the love they didn't receive, the childhood they deserved, the safety they never felt, the person they used to be, the future they thought they'd have. Night doesn't make you dramatic. Night makes you honest. And the honesty feels painful because it has nowhere to go. There's no ritual for it. No language for it, no permission for it. So it becomes fear, or overthinking, or sadness, or numbness, or restlessness. Anything except what it truly is. A soul trying to understand itself. That's why sleep feels impossible. Not because your body isn't tired, but because your heart is. Your heart is exhausted. Your mind is overloaded. Your emotions are understudied. Your needs are unheard. Your boundaries are crossed, often by you. And now we reach the core of nighttime psychology. You don't need to fix everything at night. You don't need to solve your life at night. You don't need to decide your future at night. You don't need to analyze your past at night. Night is not the time for decisions. It is the time for acknowledgement. The time to whisper to yourself, I hear you. I see the pain. I understand why it feels heavy, but we don't have to figure it out right now. You'd be surprised how quickly the mind calms down when it finally feels heard. Because at the end of the day, or at the end of the night, the thing we all want most isn't an answer. It's comfort, reassurance, safety, presence. Not fix me, just stay with me until it stops hurting. And here's the secret. The nighttime mind has been trying to teach you. If you learn how to sit with yourself in the dark, you'll finally stop fearing the light. There's something the nighttime mind understands long before the daytime mind ever catches up. Being alone with yourself is not the same as being lonely. In fact, some of the deepest loneliness in the world happens when you're surrounded by people during the day, smiling, performing, pretending. But the moment night falls, you're confronted with the truth. You don't actually know how to be with yourself. You know how to distract yourself. You know how to entertain yourself. You know how to numb yourself. But being with yourself, your real self, that's different. And that's why the night feels dangerous. Not because it's dark outside, but because it's bright inside. Everything you try to hide lights up. Every thought you bury surfaces. Every feeling you mute starts whispering again. This is the paradox of the human mind. The quieter the world becomes, the louder you get. And so people do what they always do when they feel something rising they don't want to face. They reach for anything, absolutely anything, to silence it. What if I hadn't said that? What if they didn't mean it that way? What if I choose wrong tomorrow? What if I ruin everything? What if nothing ever gets better? Nighttime creates a psychological space where imagination and fear get tangled together. The emotional brain opens the door. The logical brain is asleep, and suddenly every maybe feels like destiny. But here's the thing, nobody realizes when they're lying awake at 3:42 a.m. Your nighttime fears are not prophecies. They're projections. They're not showing you the future. They're showing you your wounds. Every what if is a disguised memory. Every fear is an emotional echo. Every scenario is a mirror for something you lost or something you never had. The mind doesn't predict at night. It remembers. It replays old traumas by imagining new disasters. It revisits old insecurities by creating new problems. It tests your past on the stage of your imagination. That's why everything feels so personal at night. Because you're not fighting the future. You're fighting the past. And the past always wins at 3 a.m. Not because it's stronger, but because you're tired. You're too tired to analyze. Too tired to argue. Too tired to regulate. Too tired to defend yourself. Nighttime makes old wounds feel fresh. Because your emotional defenses are gone. But here's a truth that people rarely understand. Nighttime emotions are valid, but they're not accurate. They come from real pain, but they don't offer real solutions. They come from real memories, but they don't reflect reality. They come from real fears, but they magnify everything out of proportion. The nighttime mind is like a funhouse mirror. It shows you the truth, but in shapes that look distorted and terrifying. And if you've ever wondered why you wake up in the morning feeling like last night's fears were exaggerated, even embarrassing, it's because the daytime brain has returned. The logical circuits come back online. The part of your mind that says, wait, that doesn't make sense, finally wakes up. You weren't irrational last night. You were overwhelmed. Nighttime isn't a test of intelligence. It's a test of emotional gravity. Some feelings are heavier in the dark. Some fears fall faster. Some memories hurt more. Some identities feel looser. You're not supposed to carry everything at night. You're supposed to notice it. Notice the ache. Notice the fear. Notice the longing. Notice the unfinishedness of your life. Because the nighttime mind, for all its chaos and drama, is telling you something very simple. Something in you needs attention. Not solutions. Not decisions. Not action. Just attention. And this is the part people rarely understand. The mind doesn't always want answers. Sometimes it just wants a witness. Someone, even if that someone is you, to sit with the pain long enough for it to loosen its grip. Because emotional pain behaves like a child. If you ignore it, it screams. If you shame it, it hides. If you deny it, it becomes desperate. But if you sit with it, truly sit with it, even silently, even without answers, it softens, and eventually it sleeps. Night isn't the enemy. Night is the reminder that you've been carrying too much, the reminder that you haven't been listening, the reminder that healing doesn't happen when you're busy. It happens when you're still. The nighttime mind isn't punishing you. It's asking you to come home to yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's why it keeps you awake. And maybe that's the strangest thing about the human mind. That it doesn't reveal itself in the noise, in the schedules, in the routines, in the daylight where everything looks logical and clean. It reveals itself in the dark, when no one's watching, when nothing's expected of you, when the world finally stops demanding, and the quiet starts asking. Because night has a way of peeling back the layers you spend all day hiding under. Your confidence, your composure, your responsibilities, your roles. All of it falls away. What's left is you, just you, unedited, unfiltered, unperformed. And that version of you, the one staring at the ceiling at 3:28 a.m., feeling a little too much, remembering a little too vividly, fearing a little too deeply. That version isn't weak. That version is honest. The nighttime mind isn't broken. It's raw. It's unmasked. It's the closest thing you'll ever get to the truth of who you are when the world isn't shaping you into something else. And maybe that's why it scares you. Because when the lights are off, you finally meet the parts of yourself that don't fit neatly into daytime conversations. The parts that hurt, the parts that hope, the parts that grieve, the parts that still believe things can be different. And here's the quiet secret people rarely admit. The nighttime mind isn't trying to ruin your sleep. It's trying to have a conversation you keep canceling during the day. A conversation about what you really want, what you really fear, what you really miss, who you really are. A conversation about the life you pretend is fine, and the life you actually want. The wounds you never looked at, the love you didn't receive, the person you lost, the person you stopped being, the person you still could become. So maybe, just maybe, the goal isn't to silence the mind at night. Maybe the goal is to listen to it, not obey it, not panic because of it, not treat every thought like a prophecy. Just listen, because behind all the fear, the overthinking, the memories, the spirals, the imaginary disasters, there's something soft, something small, something fragile and honest, a need, a truth, a pain, a longing. And the moment you acknowledge it, really acknowledge it, something loosens. The thoughts soften, the panic slows, the body unwinds, and for the first time in a long time, you feel something that isn't tension. You feel relief, because the mind isn't looking for answers. It's looking for understanding, for presence, for patience, for compassion. And when it finds that, when it finally feels seen, it stops clawing at the walls of your imagination. It rests, it quiets, it lets go. And maybe that's when sleep finally comes. Not as an escape, but as a peace offering. Not as surrender, but as trust. So wherever you are right now, Whatever time it is, I hope tonight, when the world goes quiet again, and your thoughts start drifting into the dark, you don't fight them. I hope you sit with them. I hope you breathe with them. I hope you treat them not as enemies, but as visitors. Visitors carrying messages from the parts of your life you're finally ready to understand. And when you've listened enough, when the fear has softened, when the mind has nothing left to shout, you'll feel it. That moment when the weight lifts, when the night feels gentle again, when your chest loosens, when your breath steadies, when the thoughts blur and soften into fading shapes. That's the moment the mind says, it's okay now. You can rest. So, rest. You've carried enough for today. Let the night hold the rest. Thanks for being here. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, good night.